Thing number 1. See the mask before it's too late. Did you know that recent studies show nearly 1 in 20 people displays narcissistic traits strong enough to be clinically concerning, and yet very few of us recognize it before it's too late? Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." But a narcissist doesn't even try. Instead, they create a mask, a polished, strategic version of themselves, and convince you that it's real. That's exactly how narcissistic abuse works. It begins in your imagination, with what they make you believe. That you're special, that they're rare. At first, it's all approval, charm, and understanding. But narcissists aren't seeking truth, they seek control. And that's how you spot the real danger. If someone refuses correction, if they twist every critique into an attack, you're not dealing with a healthy ego, you're facing a fragile one, hidden behind armor made of lies, charm, and manipulation. Narcissists are high-functioning performers. Many are intelligent, charismatic, even successful. But charisma without integrity is just manipulation. Everyone does. What makes you strong is seeing it now. And once you see it, you can never unsee it. The next step is learning how to disarm it. And that's exactly what we'll explore next. It doesn't matter how nice someone seems if their kindness only lasts when you're pleasing them. As Jung said, you meet your destiny on the road you take to avoid it. And often, what we mistake for destiny is just a lesson wrapped in seduction. But soon, that mask starts to slip. You begin to feel confused, uneasy, off balance. Your reality feels less certain. You feel like you're losing your grip, like you might be the problem, because they've built their mask using your deepest hopes. The hope of being understood, the hope of love, the hope of connection. But here's a powerful truth. When something feels too perfect, too fast, too intense, it probably is. Healthy love grows slowly. It's not fireworks. It's a fire built brick by brick. Narcissistic love is a bonfire, intense, hypnotic, and designed to burn out the moment you stop feeding it. That's no accident. It's what experts call gas, a term coined from a 1944 film where a husband manipulates his wife into believing she is insane. It's now a verified psychological tactic. Studies show gaslighting leads to increased cortisol, reduced self-trust, and symptoms resembling PTSD, that no one else will ever connect with you this way. And so you lower your guard. You let them in. And when things shift, because they always do, you tell yourself it's just a rough patch. That weird sense that something's off, but you can't explain it. They praised you in public, but privately they criticize everything. They make subtle jokes at your expense, then say you're too sensitive when you flinch. 1 minute, you're there everything. The next, you're walking on eggshells. These aren't mood swings. They're control tactics. You ignore the warning signs. Behind that mask is a hollow identity, built not on self-awareness, but on performance. You don't fall for the narcissist. You fall for the actor. Neuroscience backs this up. According to research published in Frontiers in Psychology, narcissists exhibit abnormal activity in the anterior insula, the part of the brain responsible for empathy. Their emotional wiring is different. They imitate empathy, but they don't feel it. That's why their charm seems so intense at first. It's calculated, not spontaneous, and your brain responds the way it would to any emotionally engaging performance. You get a dopamine hit, you trust, you bond, but what you're bonding to doesn't exist. Freud called this idealization, the stage where the narcissist floods you with validation, attention, even love, only to devalue you later. And you'll question yourself, not them. That's part of the design. Narcissists are brilliant. They read you like a book. They mirror your values, your fears, even your wounds. You think you've finally found someone who gets you. What you've found is someone who's learned to manipulate emotional language without speaking it fluently. It's emotional mimicry, like a parrot repeating human words without knowing what they mean. Seneca warned, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." Here's the problem. Narcissists don't change. What changes is the version of them you're allowed to see. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, "If someone can prove me wrong and show me my mistake, I will gladly change, for it is the truth I seek." Now, let's bring this closer to home. Maybe you felt it, and yet you still doubt yourself. You might wonder, why didn't I see it sooner? That's not your fault. You're not weak for falling for the mask. Thing number 2. Withdraw the narcissist's favorite drug. A narcissist's true addiction isn't love, it's attention. Your attention. Sigmund Freud was among the first to suggest that narcissism isn't just self, but a defense mechanism against internal fragility. What does that mean for you? That every time you react, with anger, with tears, with explanations, you're giving them exactly what they crave. You're keeping them alive. Because attention, to a narcissist, is not optional. It's oxygen. Most people are neurologically conditioned to respond to conflict by fixing it. The moment you lose your calm, you lose your center, and they win. Not because they're stronger, but because they've pulled you into a game you can't win. Detachment doesn't mean indifference. It means choosing not to be baited. It means protecting your energy from being siphoned. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. This isn't just philosophy, it's neuroscience. That's possible and expected. Narcissists panic when they sense their grip slipping. They may love bomb you again, apologize, promise, or go the opposite route. Rage, insult, smear campaigns. Understand, this is their withdrawal. They're losing supply, and they're desperate. The kind where your peace becomes sacred and untouchable. Studies show that practicing non-reactivity rewires the brain's amygdala, reducing emotional reactivity and increasing prefrontal control. The seat of reason will go deeper. Our ChatGPT will show you how to become emotionally unreachable, not numb, not passive, but composed, like a stoic warrior in the middle of a storm. That's when you stop being a source and start being a boundary, a wall they can't climb, a silence they can't decode. In therapy, this is known as radical no contact or gray rocking. You see the manipulations clearly. You notice the patterns, the predictability, the scripts, and you realize they're not mysterious or brilliant or broken in some profound way. They're just empty echoes of unmet needs. And suddenly, their power over you vanishes. You become emotionally neutral, unreactive, boring, and for a narcissist, boredom is unbearable. They seek drama like oxygen. Remove the fuel, and they suffocate in silence. A game with no rules, just shifting expectations. One day they admire your strength. The next, they call you too much. One day they admire your independence. The next, you're distant. Ask yourself, is this really about truth, or are they provoking a reaction? Because if they want chaos and you give them calm, you shift the dynamic. You're no longer a player in their game. You're a mirror they can't manipulate. And every time you try to clarify, they twist the frame. To repair, to explain. That's how you were raised. But narcissists exploit this instinct. They create chaos, then blame you for reacting. And in that reaction, they feel seen. They feel powerful. Modern psychology confirms this. According to a study from the Journal of Personality Disorders, narcissists show higher levels of activity in the ventral striatum, the brain's reward center, when receiving compliments or admiration. But here's the twist. This same part of the brain also lights up when they provoke strong negative reactions. Rage, jealousy, fear. It doesn't matter. If you're emotionally engaged, you're feeding them. That's their supply. Carl Jung warned us decades ago. Whatever is rejected from the self appears in the world as an event. Narcissists cannot face their own insecurity, so they provoke it in you. They feel worthless, so they subtly make you question your worth. They feel unloved, so they accuse you of being cold. And the more you try to prove your care, your loyalty, your good intent, the deeper you sink into their trap. This isn't about weakness, it's about wiring. Seneca said, "He who angers you conquers you." Let that land. The only winning move is not to play. That's why the concept of emotional detachment is so powerful and so misunderstood. Marcus Aurelius had a name for this. He called it equanimity, a disciplined calm that no one can steal from you. So, how do you begin? Start small, delay your reaction, breathe before you respond. Observe rather than defend. You might fear they'll escalate when you withdraw your attention, but it's in this moment, when you refuse to feed the cycle, that you reclaim your power. And here's the most powerful insight. When you stop reacting, you start seeing. This is the beginning of freedom. Not the loud, dramatic kind, the quiet kind. Now that you've withdrawn the drug, what happens next? In part 3. Thing number 3. become emotionally unreachable. There's a reason narcissists are drawn to chaos. They need it, not to survive, but to dominate. And not just any chaos. Epictetus taught that it's not things that disturb us, but our interpretation of them. This wasn't just poetry, it was psychological warfare, because the moment you control your interpretation, you disarm the narcissist. They've studied your wounds, your fears, your dreams. This is one of those trials. Learning to be still, not numb. Learning to be firm, not cruel. You're not becoming less human, you're becoming more sovereign. You're protecting your nervous system like it's sacred, because it is. They weaponize your empathy, your loyalty, your hope for understanding. That means facing the part of you that wants to scream, to lash out, to finally be heard. And telling it, not today, not for them, because you don't owe clarity to chaos. You owe peace to yourself. So when you stop responding, they'll escalate. You might hear, "You're so cold now," or "You've changed," or the classic, "Look what you've become." But this is noise. This is withdrawal. This is them realizing the game is over. Because you're no longer playing, they expect you to collapse, to beg, to fight. But when you offer no reaction, not coldness, but unshakable calm, you interrupt the pattern. You break the rhythm they rely on to control you. Your chaos, your reactions, your tears, your outrage, your need to explain yourself, your instinct to repair. But what happens when the emotional storm they expect, doesn't come? What happens when their rage meets your stillness? That's when you become invisible to their power. That's when you become unreachable. Let's begin with the Stoics. Modern neuroscience proves this. Studies at Stanford University show that emotional regulation practices like mindfulness and cognitive distancing physically change the structure of the brain. The prefrontal cortex becomes more active, enhancing judgment. The amygdala, the center of fight or flight, shrinks. Translation: the more you train yourself not to react, the more powerful and peaceful you become. There's a method therapists use in narcissistic abuse recovery. It's called gray rocking. Imagine a gray rock, dull, flat, emotionless. The narcissist tries to provoke you, seduce you, bait you, and gets nothing. No energy, no outrage, no attention, just silence. It doesn't feed them. It starves them. It confuses them. It makes you boring. And for someone addicted to control, boredom is unbearable. But let's be honest, this isn't easy. Narcissists know your buttons. They install them. Seneca wrote, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." Carl Jung believed that true strength is found in individuation, the process of becoming whole by integrating your shadow. Real-world example. A survivor of narcissistic abuse once shared that the most painful moment was the insults. It was the silence she had to learn to maintain in the face of them. "I wanted to fight. I wanted to explain. But when I said nothing, I watched him unravel. That's when I knew I was free." Your silence isn't weakness. It's precision. It's strategy. Think of it like Aikido, the martial art, where you don't resist force, you redirect it. The narcissist pushes you, step aside. They accuse you, stay still. They scream, you whisper, or you don't speak at all. They imitate your calm. They start mirroring your new behavior because they sensed you've become the source and they're trying to reconnect to it. Don't be fooled. It's not growth. It's survival. Don't mistake mimicry for maturity. And in that stillness, you rob them of their script. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. You must also break the role they've trapped you in." In part 4, we'll show you how to rewrite your identity and take back the story they tried to control. Be one that applies here. Stop trying to prove you're good. You already are. Stop trying to defend yourself. You don't need to. You see through it. You don't flinch. You don't react. You breathe. You protect your peace like it's the last fire in a frozen world. That's when something extraordinary happens. The manipulator becomes powerless, and you become untouchable. The moment you embrace that truth, their words lose weight, their games lose power. And here's something you probably haven't been told. When you become emotionally unreachable, narcissists often try to become you. Now, imagine this. The narcissist launches their attack, subtle or loud, and you're still. But there's more. Because emotional strength isn't enough. Every narcissist is a playwright, not of great stories, but of toxic dramas. And the moment you enter their life, they hand you a role. Quietly, subtly. That's exactly what happens in narcissistic dynamics. They train you, slowly, to accept a version of reality that serves them. It's a documented effect of long-term emotional manipulation. A study published in Personality and Social Psychology Bulletin showed that repeated exposure to subtle psychological control reshapes, reducing confidence, autonomy, and even memory accuracy. Victims begin to question their instincts, not because they're weak, but because their reality has been gradually overwritten. But first, you have to name the role. Identify it. Ask yourself, who have I become in this dynamic? The pleaser, the scapegoat, the emotional translator. Don't judge it, just see it. Because what you can name, you can change. Not because they're geniuses, but because they're rehearsed. You're constantly reacting, explaining, defending. Your compass spins endlessly. And while you're stuck in self-doubt, they sail freely, often right over you. They've played this scene before, and you're just the newest casting, without you even realizing it. Maybe you're the caretaker, always fixing, always forgiving, or the rebel always accused of creating problems when you question them, or worse, the emotional sponge soaking up their rage, their guilt, their shame. You never chose this part, but somehow you're playing it every day, and the longer you stay in the story, the more you forget that you were meant to write your own. Carl Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Psychologists call this identity erosion. Seneca once wrote, if you don't know which port you're sailing to, no wind is favorable. The narcissist ensures you never choose your port. Let's make it real. Maybe you've heard it 1,000 times. You're too emotional, or you always make things about you, or the deadliest one. You're just like your parent, not because it's true, but because once you believe it, you begin to behave as if it were. And every reaction you give reinforces the role. It becomes your costume, your lines, your cage. Here's what you weren't told. You can walk off that stage, today, right now, then rewrite it. That's not metaphor. It's a neurological reality. The brain is plastic. If you believe you're small, you're obedient, you're to blame, you shrink. Their accusations start bouncing. Their chaos no longer sticks. And in that confusion, they do what all manipulators eventually do. They either escalate or disappear. One notable example, Dr. Ramani, a clinical psychologist who has spent decades researching narcissistic abuse, shared in multiple interviews that the moment a victim stops explaining and starts observing, the entire game collapses. You were just someone looking for connection, safety, meaning, because to stay free, you'll need a foundation they can't reach. In Part 5, we'll teach you how to build an identity rooted in your values, not in their approval. A life that no narcissist can touch. And they offered a distorted mirror. But you don't need that mirror anymore. Because now you're building your own. That's how you win. Not by arguing louder, but by reclaiming your right to be. Let them. Either way, you're free. But when you begin to believe you're worthy, free, sovereign, your posture changes. Your voice deepens, your presence shifts, and the narcissist feels it, even before you say a word. According to research in neuroimage, deliberate reflection and self-redefinition strengthen new neural pathways. In short, when you start living differently, your brain starts being different, and suddenly, the role begins to crack. The script fades, the mask you were wearing, even if it wasn't yours, begins to fall. Marcus Aurelius said, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. Here's where the real magic begins. The narcissist starts losing control, not because you attacked, but because you refuse to keep playing. Their lines stop landing. Real survivors have done this. Public figures, thought leaders, therapists. You're not who they said you were. You never were. And yet, the transformation doesn't end with just walking away. There's a line Viktor Frankl wrote while imprisoned in a Nazi concentration camp that still echoes through time. Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms to choose one. His attitude in any given set of circumstances. That's the kind of identity no narcissist can reach. Studies from the University of California show that value affirmation, the act of reflecting on your core beliefs, literally strengthens brain regions linked to self-control and reduces stress hormone levels like cortisol. In other words, the more often you reconnect with what matters to you, the more emotionally immune you become to outside manipulation. one rooted not in appearance, not in approval, but in values, the kind that doesn't collapse when someone disapproves, ignores, or attacks, because it's built from the inside. Most people live in reaction, especially those who've been near narcissists. You react to their moods. You shape yourself to their silence. You adapt to their shifting rules. Slowly, without noticing, your identity becomes strategic, not authentic. You live to avoid conflict, to maintain peace, to preserve the connection. But here's the cost. You lose yourself. And once you lose your values, you lose your boundaries. That's exactly what a narcissist wants, a self you abandon to keep them close. But neuroscience says you can rebuild it. Think about that. A narcissist says you're being selfish, and instead of defending or apologizing, your mind replies, "No, I value self-respect, I value truth, and I'm acting in alignment with that." They say, "You've changed," and your body doesn't flinch, because yes, you have intentionally not reacted. That's the difference between being emotionally unstable and being emotionally grounded. Narcissists only control people who've forgotten their foundation. When your actions come from values, not reactions, you become unreadable to them, unreachable. Yet he wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." His compass wasn't approval, it was principle. And that is what you need now. An inner compass, that docent move when someone tries to manipulate the map. Marcus Aurelius lived in a world of politics, betrayal, war. So how do you build that? Start small. Ask yourself today, what do I stand for? Not what do I fear, or what do I avoid, or who do I want to please? What do I stand for? Loyalty, honesty, freedom, dignity. Choose 3, write them down, say them out loud. These are not affirmations. He says, when you say yes to others, make sure you're not saying no to yourself. That's the line, the boundary, the test, because narcissists demand your yes constantly, not directly, but through guilt, through silence, through manipulation. When your yes is automatic, yourself disappears. But when your yes is aligned with your values, you begin to live with integrity. And integrity, it's not something they can access, because it was built without them, outside of their reach, inside of your truth. Terrifies the narcissist. These are anchors. And the next time you feel pulled, these words pull you back. They can't push the old buttons, because the old operating system is gone. You don't panic when they disappear. You don't beg when they criticize. You don't explain your existence anymore. You exist, fully, steadily, silently. Take for example, Dr. Gabor, an expert in trauma and human behavior, because even with strength, even with calm, the pain they left behind is real. So in part 6, we'll go further. We turn their poison into power and show you how to transmute this pain into the fuel that changes everything. Because now, they can't predict you. They can't manipulate you. Even Carl Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, not who they want, not who they trained. Who you are. That's not found in reaction. That's discovered in stillness, in clarity, in choosing what matters even when no one claps for it. You are no longer here to be liked. You're here to live aligned. And that identity, that's not up for debate. That's not conditional. But one thing remains. There's a moment in every survivor's journey where the question shifts. It's no longer why did this happen to me, but what can I do with what happened to me? According to studies published in neuroscience and biobehavioral reviews, survivors of prolonged manipulation show altered activity in the hippocampus and amygdala, the areas that govern memory and emotional regulation. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire while burying children and facing betrayal, wrote, "What stands in the way becomes the way. They give silence or projection, so your power comes from giving yourself what they won't." Closure is not something you get, it's something you build. Pain is not the end, it's a doorway, but only if you walk through it consciously. That means feeling everything, not bypassing, not denying, feeling the betrayal, the rage, the grief, but then choosing what it will mean to you. That's why you felt confused. That's why your past feels foggy. That's why small triggers make your heart race. You weren't just hurt, you were reprogrammed. And now, it's time to reclaim the system. That shift from victim to author is what changes lives. Because the pain doesn't vanish, but it becomes fuel. It becomes meaning. As Viktor Frankl wrote, after surviving the Holocaust, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. That's where your power is. Not in revenge, in transformation. Narcissistic abuse isn't just psychological, it's neurological. The Stoics didn't sugarcoat pain, they studied it. This is where many get stuck. They wait for justice, for apologies, for closure. But with narcissists, that never comes. They don't give healing. Let's go further. Studies on post-traumatic growth, published in the Journal of Traumatic Stress, reveal that survivors who confront their pain with purpose often emerge with increased resilience, deeper self-awareness, and stronger values. In other words, trauma becomes transformation, but not by accident. It takes a decision, a clear, conscious decision to stop trying to erase the past and start forging a future because of it. You want proof? Look at survivors who've turned their story into impact. Think of Oprah Winfrey, who endured childhood abuse and emotional manipulation and used it to become one of the most powerful voices in the world. You may not want a platform. You may not want to speak out. That's fine. Your power isn't in the noise. It's in your clarity, in your silence that no longer holds fear. In the relationships, you now choose differently. In the way you walk into a room without shrinking. In the way you say no, not with anger, but with finality. Or Tyler Perry, raised by a violent father who used his trauma to fuel stories of healing and redemption. These aren't just success stories. They're alchemy, pain turned into power. But let's bring it back to you. Epictetus, once a slave who became a philosopher, said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." That's your goal now. Not to master others, not to prove anything, but to master you. Your mind, your body doesn't flinch when you hear their name. That's how you know you've transmuted the pain. Not when you forget it, but when it no longer defines you, your reactions, your story. Because once you do, the narcissist loses all relevance. They become a character in a past chapter, one you no longer reread. Your nervous system starts to stabilize. Your thoughts become clear. You don't need to be fearless. You need to be faithful to yourself, to the version of you that stayed, that endured, that protected something sacred inside, even when everything outside was collapsing. And here is the truth. Most don't hear. Your healing isn't just personal. It's generational. Every time you break the cycle, by choosing clarity over confusion, by standing firm instead of folding, you're not just healing yourself, you're protecting the people you'll love in the future. You're becoming the version of you that they will never break again. This was never just about surviving a narcissist. This was about becoming unbreakable, not by denying the pain, but by using it, learning from it. And now you have. You saw the mask. You took back your energy. You mastered your calm. You rewrote your story. You anchored your identity. And now you've turned poison into power, because your voice just might be the one that wakes them up. Not everyone will understand your journey, but those who hear this and see themselves in it, they'll never forget it.